tree that something got ate up or what. But we would hear it howling, and it would wake us up out of our sleep. And James is saying to rich people who don't know Jesus Christ, weep, begin to burst out in tears, and have your tears punctuated by shrieks and by loud sounds that sound like a wolf howling. Why, James? Why should they weep? Why should their weeping be characterized by howling? Why such drastic measures? Well, he gives the reason in the last part of verse 1. Because your miseries, which are coming upon you. You see, in the mind of James, these rich people are not being addressed to offer them salvation. These rich people have turned their back on Jesus Christ. They're not saved. They're choosing to live life without Christ. And James says, in light of that, in light of the fact that you're trusting in your riches, you're trusting in your bank account, you're trusting in your possessions, you're not willing to give yourself over to Christ. He says, weep in a manner of howling. Why? Because your miseries, because of your miseries, your wretchedness, your distresses, your hardships that are going to be coming upon you. It's so certain that James pictures it as on the way. He's talking about a future day of judgment when they stand before God and have to give an account to God, not as Christians, but as unsaved people. And they're going to find out that their riches mean nothing in the presence of God. They don't have Jesus Christ. And James is telling them of their destiny, that the time is coming. It's really already on the way. Your miseries are actually coming, and they're going to finally hit you. And that's why you need to weep. That's why you need to burst out into tears. That's why there needs to be hollering and shouting and piercing sound that sound like the wailing and the howling of a wolf. You see, our money matters to God. It matters so much to God that the eternal destiny of these rich people will be affected because of their use and lack of use when it comes to money. That's how important it is. That God is going to hold us accountable. He's not indifferent. He doesn't just look to the side and say it doesn't matter. He says it does matter. And it matters so much in the lives of these unsaved rich people that it's how they use their money that's going to cause them to experience the judgment of God. Do you realize that how you use your money matters to God? That every time you use that ATM card or that credit card, every time you write a check, every time you set money aside for this or for that, or you purchase something, it matters to God. God says so much about money, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And if we're going to learn anything from the materialistic rich, the lesson we must learn is how we handle our money matters to God. But there's a second lesson, and that lesson is that money is not to be hoarded. Money is not to be stockpiled. Money's not simply to be accumulated into a heap, so to speak. And that's the point that James makes in verse 2. He wants us to understand that when it comes to our money, we are to use our money, our possessions, for the glory of God. Whether we have a little or whether we have a lot, it's to be used for the glory of God. You see, in verse 1, James condemned the materialistic rich. But now in verses 2 through 6, he's going to lay out charges against them. He's going to let them know what the charges are, and that's the reason why they're being condemned. And the first charge that he brings against them is that they have hoarded up money and possessions. They're guilty of hoarding money and possessions. Look at what James says in verse 2 and the middle, up to the middle part of verse 3. He says, your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. James looks at the possessions of the rich. He refers to them as riches, garments, gold, and silver. That's how you could tell in that day that somebody was well off. You looked at their riches or their wealth. You looked at their garments, and you also looked at their gold and silver. And James makes a statement about the condition of these unsaved rich people's wealth. He says, first of all, your riches have rotted. That is, they stand in a rotted condition. The money that they have, the possessions that they have, James says they've rotted. And he doesn't stop there. He talks about their garments that they spent a lot of money on, garments that impressed others, garments that when you looked at them, he said, money, money, money. But he says he looks at their garments and they stand moth-eaten. It's the food of moths when it comes to your garments. And then he looks at their gold and their silver. And he says something that is really strange. He says that your gold and silver have rusted. And some interpreters of the Bible have wrestled over that because technically gold and silver can't rust. Now, James is not some idiot. He knows that. But even in his day, there might have been money like gold and silver that was mixed with other things that could become corroded. But I think more than likely what James is saying is, even though it's gold, even though it's silver, when God looks at it, it's rust, it's corroded. So James is saying, on behalf of God, the charge that I'm making against you unsaved rich people is the hoarding of your money and possessions. So that when God looks at your riches, what he sees is rot. When God looks at their garments, what he sees is food for moths. When God looks at their gold and their silver, what he sees is rust and corrosion. What's his point? His point is that they're not using their money and their possessions for the glory of God. They're stockpiling it. They're accumulating things. And those things are of no value to God and to God's program and God's plan. So that when God looks at all of that money, all he sees is rust and corrosion, money that could be used for him and his program and his kingdom, but it's not being used that way. So when God looks at all those nice garments, I mean, rich people aren't stupid. Rich people are not going to let the moths just eat up all their garments. But when God looks at it, all he looks at when he sees these garments, this is nothing more than just food for the moths. And when God looks at their wealth, riches, God says this is nothing but rotten stuff because it's not being used for my kingdom and for my glory. In fact, James says when it comes to their money, when it comes to their silver, that it's rusted, it's corroded, and then he personifies that rust. He says that rust is going to take the witness stand. That is, in a future day of judgment, he turns the rust and the corrosion into a person, and that person is going to walk into the court and saying, I'm the rust of their gold and silver. I'm the testimony of the fact that they have not used the possessions for God. And he's going to take the witness stand and witness against the rich, saying you stockpiled it, but you didn't use it for me. And it's not only that the rust will witness against the rich people. James says that the rust will eat them up as fire. The lack of use of your possessions, your money, James says, will be used against these rich people, and it will testify against you, and it will bring judgment upon you so that your very body, your very flesh